Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Ashtotra Shatashi Shamara's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Ashtotra Shatashi Shamara's Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Yamunamai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Nugovardhan Dham Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Title Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 29, Talks between Narada and King Prachanibarhi. We're on text 70. So, if everybody could please repeat after me. Naham mameti bhavo yam purushe vyavadiyate yavad buddhi mano sharta Guna Vyuho Hi Anadiman Naham Ameta Bhavoyam Purushe Vyavadiyate Yavad Buddhi Mano Charta Guna Vyoho Nadiman Naham Ameti Bhavoyam Purushe Vyavadiyate Yavad Buddhi Mano Charta Guna Vyuho Nadiman Naham Ameta Bhavoyam Purushe Vyavadiyate Yavad Buddhi Mano Charta Guna Vyuho Nadiman Okay, word by word. Na, not. Aham, I. Mama, mine. Iti, thus. Bhavaha, consciousness. Ayam, this. Purushe, in the living entity. Vyavadiyate, is separated. Yavat, so long. Buddhi, intelligence. Manaha, mind. Aksha, senses. Arta, sense objects. Guna, of the material qualities. Vyuha, a manifestation. He, certainly. Anadiman, the subtle body, existing since time immemorial. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As long as there exists the subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exist as well. Purport. The desires in the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego cannot be fulfilled without a gross body composed of the material elements earth, water, air, fire, and ether. When the gross material body is not manifest, the living entity cannot factually act in the modes of material nature. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the subtle activities of the mind and intelligence continue due to the sufferings and enjoyments of the living entity's subtle body. The consciousness of material identification, such as I and mine, still continues because such consciousness has been extant from time immemorial. However, when one transfers to the spiritual world by virtue of understanding Krishna consciousness, the actions and reactions of both gross and subtle bodies no longer bother the spirit soul. Om Jnanatiparandasya Karanjana Shalakaya Chakshulanmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam karitivachalam bhangam langai tekirim yakkripa tamaham vande shigarun dinitalinam. Vancha kapatrubhishcha kripa sindhu bevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Can I read the translation again? As long as there exists the subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exist as well. So in this particular section of Srimad Bhagavatam, which we've been studying every day, we study every day. There's a talk happening between Narada Muni, a great sage, great devotee of Krishna, and this king named Prachani. So Narada Muni, the great sage Narada Muni, is trying to enlighten King Prachani with transcendental knowledge. He's trying to awaken him from his slumber of ignorance. Just like when we arise in the morning, I mean, generally speaking, people, they use an alarm clock. Of course, some people don't, but most people do. And that is the ears, although we're sleeping, we're in deep sleep or whatever type of sleep we're in. When that alarm clock goes off, generally speaking, we hear it and we wake up. So the power of sound has the power to wake us up, from sleep. But also somebody, or also people, the living entity who is sleeping in ignorance, means they're ignorant of their spiritual identity, ignorant of so many spiritual knowledge. They're ignorant of spiritual knowledge. They can be awakened by the process of hearing, hearing spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And that's what Narada Muni is doing. He's trying to awaken King Prachani, which he is ultimately going to be successful in that endeavor as we continue. And part of this section that we've been discussing is that it's describing how the living entity, or the people in this world, or the living entities in this world, whether they're in animal species, human species, there's a soul there. And the soul, that's who we are, we're the soul. We're animating, that's animating the body. And in this discussion between Narada Muni and Prachani, he's explaining there's the transmigration of the soul. Right? Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tata dehantara prapyadas tatra namuyati. So the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to there's no women in boyhood. So boyhood to youth to old age, and then some of the soul passes at the time of death into another body. That's reincarnation. It says a sober person is not bewildered by such a change, which Trivita Prabhu made the point the other day that Krishna is referring to a sober person means a person who witnesses the death of someone or their family. They're not bewildered by such a change. Because Arjuna, he's on a battlefield and he's going to witness a bunch of deaths. So anyways, Krishna speaking to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, that verse. So yeah, that's what we've been discussing, this principle of reincarnation. And so much of our future, so much of what we gain in this life, so much of what happen in relation to what happens in our next life is determined by the desires we cultivate. We're all cultivating, everyone in this room, without a doubt, is cultivating certain desires. It's unavoidable. Just like, I mean, sometimes people in life, they just want to sit back and be neutral or something, but we can't. We have to cultivate desires, whether we like it or not. Just like when we're driving in traffic on a freeway. We're going to Tucson, for example. It's like we have to make decisions. We have to go left, we have to go right, we have to speed up, we have to slow down. Right? We have to make decisions. We have to get gas. So within our lives, similarly, we're forced to make decisions. Right? This way, that way, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, listen to this, don't listen to that. So much of our desires that we're cultivating are based on our association, I can say all of them, and specifically what we're hearing, what we're subjecting our ears to, or who we're subjecting our ears to. Just like recently, a very famous talk show, what do you call him? Host? Talk radio host? What do you call him, a host? I don't want to say names. Anyway, a talk show host, very famous number one practically for decades here in America. He got cancer, and he passed away. And he was but amazingly, he would speak every day for 3 hours. 5 days a week. That's amazing. It's like a mystic ability. 3 hours every day for 5 days a week for many years, and he was top in his league. And not only would he speak 3 hours a day for 5 days a week for so many years, but millions of people would listen to him. It wasn't like he had one guy listen to him. A lot of people listened to him. And the person who was speaking, he was we could say standing or we could say propagating certain ideas from his speeches. And also the people who were hearing, they were getting these ideas from him. Right? Didati pratigranati. Revealing one's mind and confidence, inquiring confidentially. There was some exchange going on there, hearing and listening. And this definitely affects the people who are listening. What the person is saying affects the people who are listening in the realm of them, the hearers cultivating certain desires. So similarly, there's so many spiritual discourses going on all over the world right now as we speak. We're trying to have one here and all over the world. And those are all, and nowadays, a lot of those are being recorded. Right? We have our Mayapur TV, so many, live streams, video streams. So if we want, we have the ability also to hear 3 hours a day. We could hear more than that, actually. So then the question is, okay, well, do we have that taste? Do we have that attraction to hear 3 hours a day? Right? Like that guy I was just saying, he just passed away, famous talk show guy, and speaking 3 hours a day. He not only did he have a taste, attraction to speaking like that 3 hours a day, but people had an attraction to hear it 3 hours a day. So, so if we're able to cultivate attraction in that way, then that is for our ultimate benefit. That's for our ultimate spiritual benefit. Because as we were discussing, I don't know, a few weeks ago, this idea of it's not enough just to mark oneself externally, as I read that quote from Prabhupada. So, in other words, to put tilak on this clay here, or to change one's attire, and whatever, put on these neck beads. It's not enough to, in other words, that in itself, we shouldn't claim, okay, I'm a Vaishnav just because of those, or I'm a devotee of Krishna, I'm a follower of Krishna just because of those markings. But Srila Prabhupada, founder of the Hare Krishna movement, he was saying that we have to become knowledgeable. We have to know. And this point is stressed over and over and over again by Srila Prabhupada, that we have to know. We have to know the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Just like Prabhupada says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prakashananda Saraswati, this great impersonalist, this person propounding the idea that God is impersonal, means he's just like a light, right? Formless. So Prakashananda Saraswati, he was criticizing Lord Chaitanya, and there were two devotees. Does anyone remember those devotees? Yes. Yes. And Tapan Mishra. Chandrasekhar Tapan Mishra. Now, these devotees, I mean, they're in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. They're not, by any means, of course, no devotee is ordinary, but they're very special in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. They're there. They made it there. But Srila Prabhupada, interesting point is that Srila Prabhupada, he brings up in the purport there that Chandrasekhar Acharya and Tapan Mishra, they should have been able to defeat Prakashananda Saraswati and his followers. Means philosophically. They should have been able to do that. And, interesting enough, Prabhupada makes some comments there of them being on a lower level, specifically Kanishthadikar, because they couldn't defeat Prakashananda Saraswati. So recently I read this little incident with Gorkashordas Babaji. Gorkashordas Babaji was in Vrindavan, I believe, anyways, wherever he was, in Mayapur, Vrindavan, and he was chanting Hare Krishna on his beads and chanting, and one young man, he came to try to live with Gorkashordas Babaji, or by him, right? Try to follow his example. And the young man just wasn't qualified. He just wasn't qualified to do that. And Gorkashordas Babaji, he made a comment. He said, just by one cannot produce a child simply by screaming and simulating labor pains. So someone may, there are people, unfortunately, many, deranged people these days in the world. Now, if there's a deranged person, they're just screaming and simulating, imitating labor pains, but they're not pregnant. They're not going to produce a child. So, similarly, Gorkashor's Babaji, he was saying that in relation to this young man, that, okay, you've come here and you're chanting and you're, engaged in those activities, but just as, somebody screaming and simulating labor pains cannot produce a child, so similarly, your activities cannot produce Krishna consciousness within yourself. So in other words, to become free from all of the complexities of material nature, to become free from illusion, to really awaken, is not maybe as easy as some would like to think. As some would like to think it is. So what's the hope? Well, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he mentions in chapter 3, text 31, something in that regard, which I'll read here. Maybe oops, I think it's 3:21. Well, it looks like I'm lost here. It's that one where Krishna, in the purport, Prabhupada says that shouldn't resent the principle. If you look it up, resent. If you look up resent the principle, Bhagavad Gita, as it is, it should come up. Can't believe it. I believe somewhere there. Okay. All right. So Prabhupada, so in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, specifically in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a point that in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not be able to follow all the injunctions strictly. Means all the things that should be done and all the things that shouldn't be done. One may not be able to follow that. But one should not resent the principle. And then gradually, as time goes on, one will be able to follow it. So, and then in the next verse, following that purport, Krishna says that for one who disregards these injunctions, and then they're lost. I believe that's what he says. So the other day, Thursday, I gave a class and I was explaining the importance of rising early in the morning, and not only rising early in the morning, but not going back to sleep. Because you could say, "Hey, I rose in the morning. I got up for Mangal Arati, and then, I went to Mangal Arati, and then afterwards I went back to sleep." And specifically, I'm referring to this as a problem in the sense of there's no good reason to do that. It means they're not sick. They're just go back to sleep. It's an urge, the urge to sleep. So I gave a class, and then one devotee afterwards, there's a few comments afterwards, during the day, a few conversations I had. And one devotee brought up the idea, he came by. He said, "Oh, well, I'm glad I don't live in the brahmacharya ashram after that talk." Because pretty much it seems as if I was giving no room, no wiggle room. Now, of course, who am I? And people are people, and people do what they do. Whether you say something or not. So, but in other words, if one's determined, then they'll sleep. But yeah, so he said that. Oh, I'm glad I don't live in the brahmacharya ashram. And after that talk, and he made the point that yeah, as long as we don't resent the principle that okay, well, I don't try to say, oh, well, it's not really important to wake up early in the morning, although it says so many times it is important, but try to wiggle out of it. But we understand that that is important, that it is true, that the knowledge is that we accept it. We accept the principle, even though we may not be able to follow. Now that's a lot better than just trying to make up excuses why we can't do it or why it's not important. We're trying to change the philosophy. As Srila Prabhupada said on different occasions, he says, what can I do? I can't change the philosophy for the Americans, certain difficult things. Okay, looks like Javita Prabhu. Okay. End of the purport. 331. Okay, I'm looking at. Sorry, looking at 330. It says 31 at top. Sorry. Okay, so 331. Prabhupada says in the purport, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord. But because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. So yeah, we can't, or we shouldn't, it's not advised that we resent certain principles or we try to change things because it's not easy for us. Nor, and here, Prabhupada, the Krishna says in the next verse, 332, but those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. So we shouldn't resent certain principles because they're difficult, nor should we resent people who just repeat them. That's an important point too. It's like, hey, you're repeating that. It's like, I'm just repeating. Don't. What do you say? Don't shoot the messenger. So, but yeah, we should try, and that's what a honest, good-hearted person does. They try. They try to follow, and hopefully, by their endeavors and by their struggles and by the good association of others, they're able to follow. And for every particular person, there's certain steps that we need to take, and every individual, if we're what do you call that when you're reflective? Every individual who's reflective, self-reflective, introspective, we'll know, what are the steps. Now, of course, sometimes we're introspective and it's confusing, what steps we need to take. Therefore, we may introspect and have an idea about what the steps are, and then we could get external confirmation. It means from senior devotees, those who are more advanced along the path. What are the steps? And we should try to take those steps. Not that we should refuse or get around them. So, for some people, that step means they need to get initiated, by authentic guru. They need to become a student. For some, it means they need to increase the number of rounds, japa, and at least 16. For some, whatever, there's so many different things. For some, get married. For some, take sannyas. For some, there's different things we need to do. For some, be guru, diksha guru. So we should try to figure out what are those steps we need to take, and take them. And this is actually the way that we're able to transcend or break through all of these barriers, because there's a lot of barriers, and a lot of them are mental barriers. But here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada's mentioning these different coverings, right? You have the subtle body, the material mind, intelligence, false ego, conception of self, right? I and mine, which means I am this body, and things in relation to this body are mine. This is illusory conception. So we need to break through all of this, and we're able to break through all of this by not resenting the principle or people who repeat the principles, but trying our best to follow the principles, and trying our best to follow people who repeat the principles. And taking the necessary steps, whatever they may be, that we need to take individually. And in this way, you could say pushing ourselves. Right? We're pushing ourselves. And that's necessary. That is absolutely necessary. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It said, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description of his life says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who could be a better, who could be a better wife? Who could be a better mother than Mother Shachi? Who could be a better wife than Vishnu Priya, right? Vishnu Priya, Lakshmi Priya. Lakshmi Priya is second. Yeah, Vishnu Priya, Lakshmi. Vishnu second, Vishnu Priya second. Yeah. Who could be a better wife than Vishnu Priya? And who could be better associates, right, than all of those wonderful associates, right? Srivas, Pandit, so many wonderful associates. They're the best. Pure devotees, right? Who could be better than them? But then what did he do? He did the unimaginable for all of them. He left. He left home. And it said, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, to spread Krishna consciousness, to preach Krishna consciousness, right? South India, Jagannath Puri, to set the example for followers of him, of renunciation. Of course, so many of the followers, they would come every year. I think they came for 20 years. Every year to Jagannath Puri, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was located, they would visit him. And, but still, he's coming to set example how to be a devotee, and from that example we see that he left that situation, although it was most nice, to spread Krishna consciousness. So we may not do that exactly, but we have certain steps, and they may not be exactly comfortable. So we should try to be eager for those. All right, so I think I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Bhajanarayan Swami, questions or comments?
Now, I'm wondering what's the difference between I don't resent the principle. I can't do it now, but I know that it's valuable. And then lethargy. How do we deal with? And I'm thinking of, who was it? St. Augustine, who was a young prince and, wanted to be a devout Catholic, but he was very wealthy and handsome. And he said, "Oh, Lord, give me celibacy, just not yet."
Yeah.
So what's the line between, because there's the and almost done, but just make sure, there's the Icarus principle that one flies too high and then crashes. And we see that with devotees. They just want to do everything, and they can't sustain it, and they feel bad, and they collapse. So Prabhupada used to say, slow and steady wins the race. So where is the line between lethargy and moving at a healthy pace?
Yeah. All right, thank you. Yeah, about St. Augustine, just it's interesting because he said, yes, praying, Lord, please give me celibacy, but, not now. And interesting about that is that he said he was like praying for quite some time, like I don't know if it was years, but he, often. And then it said he realized that actually I was praying, but I didn't fully want it. I actually didn't want it. But later, of course, he's not Saint Augustine for no reason. He overcame things, became preaching, powerful. Anyways, but yeah, one devotee, just the thing that's coming to mind. He says he gave this example that there's this. One was the comfort zone. One was was like the progress zone, and then I forgot what he named the other one. It was like the overboard, too much.
Fry out.
Yeah, fry out. Okay, deep fry. Burning yourself out, or. So yeah, I mean, like we have to be reasonable. We have to be logical, or we have to use our common sense. And as Srila Prabhupada wrote, that devotee asking about Tulsi, the care of Tulsi, wrote so many questions, and then Prabhupada said, and he said, and also you could use your common sense.
What he did was he answered the core ones
Maybe.
for the rest.
Yeah. So he answered the core ones. Yeah. And if you don't have,
Use your common sense, and then if you don't.
he said, if you don't have common sense, or he said, if you don't have common sense, ask somebody who does. Right? They'll help you. So yeah, we have to use our common sense, and specifically, important is to be willing to hear others, and that if they don't think our ideas are good, then we should seriously consider, and we should even reject. In some cases,
Reject them, reject our own.
reject our own.
Oh, there.
Like one devotee, he very very senior devotee, Prabhupada disciple, and practically senior in so many ways. I mean, from a managerial perspective, part of the GBC, and early Srila Prabhupada disciple, sannyasi, guru, and and he would say that, yes, I have certain ideas, and I present them to my god brothers, and I do what they think is best. Like, in other words, if I have an idea and they don't think it's good, then I'll just give up the idea. So, for example, like that kind of zone, it's going overboard. There was one devotee. He he was living in Mayapur, India, and I think he was living in a tree. I think devotees. Yeah, he was living in a tree, eating whatever nuts and berries, and chanting a lot of Hare Krishna, and eventually, devotees mentioned it to Prabhupada. Oh, there's so and so. He's living in that tree, and Prabhupada didn't say anything. So then the next morning walk, and then something came up where this. The devotees mentioned about this devotee living in a tree. Said, "Oh, he said he likes living in a tree." And then Prabhupada says, "Oh, as soon as you say I like, oh, that's Maya." So he didn't appreciate him. Anyways, eventually this devotee, after living in a tree for some time, he couldn't maintain it. He left. So before we do radical things, or before we do practically anything that will have effect on others and ourselves, we could check with others. What do you think? And this way we know we're not going overboard. And in terms of lethargy and comfort zone, if we surround ourselves by others, other devotees, then naturally we'll be pushed to make advancement, or to do things that radical, in many ways, radical things that we are, challenging things, difficult things that we may not have thought about or we may not even have done. Just like, young men joining the ashram. And in many ways, that's quite a feat. Southern California, SanDiego, very materially beautiful place. A lot of sense gratification going on. A lot of opportunities, right? But someone comes to the temple. Whatever. I came to the temple, and through the association of devotees and through the my practice of Krishna consciousness, and through their advice and guidance, and hey, why don't you try living in the temples? So okay. Now, would I have ever thought that? Would I ever thought to do that? Not necessarily, but it was a push, in the right direction. And we have devotees here also. I know, the devotee stories here, living in the temple, and there was a bit of a good push in a good direction from others. So, that's how it goes. There's a, nice push there. Sorry for the long drawn out.
Yeah, nice question, nice guitar. Thank you. You reminded me that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur discusses a principle that we should understand what the process of Krishna consciousness is, the levels of advancing in Krishna consciousness. He said one should be firmly situated where they are by steadiness in their practice. One should always be wanting to take that next step. But he warns, don't do it too quickly, because if you do, you're gonna stumble and fall. But when you've taken, you're wanting to take that next step, and when you do, with some effort and some practice, then you'll become, empowered and steady. So now you've taken another step and you've, advanced. And he warns that if you don't do that, always wanting to take the next step, that you'll become stuck. And because of not wanting to progress, your desire isn't that, then there's the danger that you actually backslide from where you're presently.
Yeah, I read that the other day. The Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that if somebody who's not mature or ready starts meditating on certain, they're trying to, like the Prakriti Sahajas, they're trying to enter into Krishna's pastimes, and they're trying to, the gopis and Krishna, and all, they're trying to enter these higher topics. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that if one tries to do certain things like that, if they're not sufficiently or properly ready, then instead of going that direction, they'll develop opposite inclinations. And you see that, people that try to, that saying, I guess it's American saying, jump the gun. Try to go too fast, then they'll develop opposite inclinations. And we see that, like that person anyways, there's some examples. But, yes, Travita Prabhu.
As you were speaking, thank you for the very nice class.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
I kept thinking of the Nectar of Instruction, text 3. You practically dealt with every one of these elements. 6 principles: favorable, enthusiasm, endeavoring confidence, patience, and then acting according to regular principle, tattva karma, or doing all these things. And at the same time, abandoning association with devotees and following the footsteps of previous acharyas. If any one of these is not present, you're going to be in trouble. But so much of it was dealt with, by what you were speaking about. If you're not, you can be enthusiastic, but you have to be patient at the same time. Otherwise, you'll try to do too much. You have to be patient.
And you have to be determined.
Yes, you have to be determined. In relation to what? The activities of devotional service.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of it probably this invaluable book, you know, it gives very practical instructions, right?
Yeah, great book, Nectar of Instruction. Yeah, and just lastly is that there's 5 most potent forms of devotional service, right? Hearing Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, chanting the holy names, residing in a holy place, and, you know, worshiping the deity with faith and reverence, right? Honor. But if we analyze these different, these 5 processes, the most potent process of devotional service, and even a slight attachment to these, one can awaken love for Krishna. If we analyze these, we see that they really become alive through the association of devotees, right? Like we say, oh, don't hear from non-devotees the holy name. It's a holy name, but hear from, you know, real devotees. Then the power is there, or the Bhagavatam, or holy place, right, or deity worship. All of these things could be contaminated by people. So the devotees, they really bring it to life. You know, like Srila Prabhupada, you know, he brought it to life. So that's an important point to note too. So that's how we, you know, make the most progress. All right, thank you. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we might hear a class from Bhajanarayan Swami tomorrow, or somebody else, we'll see.